Вітаю, мене звати Юрій Фізер. І з сьогоднішнім своїм гостем я буду обговорювати дуже важливу тему. Як може розвиватися війна, яку Путін розпочав в Україні 24 лютого цього року? До чого він може бути готовий ще? Чи натисне він на ядерну кнопку, про що усі попереджають? Про це та інше я поговорю із своїм дуже поважним гостем. Це сер Лоуренс Фрідман, почесний професор Королівського коледжу Лондона, експерт із воєнних досліджень. Саме він зможе дати відповіді на ті запитання, які я для нього приготував. Sir Lawrence, greetings and thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so let's start. And my first question would be as follows. I would say that we have to go to the very beginning, to the origins, I would even say. Was the Russian invasion in Ukraine inevitable?
I don't think the invasion was inevitable. There's always decisions to be made. And given how things have turned out, perhaps if they'd thought further ahead, they wouldn't have bothered because they would have seen that they were getting into a greater difficulty than they would have imagined. I think the problem, as you will be well aware, lies in the difficulty of Putin thinking of Ukraine as an independent state with its own identity, with a strong government and a strong society that would not crumble at the first push. And the issue obviously goes back to 1991, to the breakup of the Soviet Union, to the color revolutions, and then to 2014. And I think once Russia had taken Crimea and sort of got away with it, it probably thought it could get away with similar things in the future. But I think part of the problem lay in the messy situations left in Donetsk and Luhansk, which I thought and others thought was things that the Russians could live with almost indefinitely. But Putin appears to have decided that he wanted to bring them to a head and sort them out once and for all. So it's a combination of an arrogance on Russia's part in terms of how they viewed Ukraine and Ukraine's ability to resist, which is key, combined with a frustration that he hadn't quite got his way in eastern Ukraine in 2014-15.
Okay. Putin made a lot of mistakes in Ukraine beginning from the February, and he has made a lot of failures. And if he has learned from these mistakes, how can the battlefield look like in the coming weeks or months?
I think Russia's basic problem is that they lost the chance to win a regular war on the battlefield. With different tactics, they might have been able to make the sort of gains they're after now in the early weeks of the war, but they tried to do too much and failed. Then they used up an awful lot of men and equipment in the summer on Severodonetsk, and they just run out of people, essentially. And the mobilization provides only limited help on that. And they're having to use old stocks, while Ukraine, as we know, has been strengthened, has a stronger motivation because people understand why they're fighting, and has been getting modern Western equipment that has made a real difference. So I think the stage we've reached is that Russia is rather desperate to hold the line, to hold back Ukrainian advances in Luhansk, Kherson, and tried to make some progress themselves in Donetsk. So we know all that, but this is now being combined with a rather ferocious campaign to undermine the will of the Ukrainian people by attacks on your infrastructure and residential areas and so on. And this has been there right from the start, again, as you all well know. But I think everything at the moment is more desperate from the Russian side, and that means they're moving to more extreme measures to try to change things around. I don't think they'll succeed in the sense that they want to succeed on either side, but again, I don't need to tell you that they can still cause a lot of pain in the process.
Sir Friedman, do you see personally at least some logic in what Putin is doing right now in Ukraine?
There's a sort of logic. It's, I mean, the most logical thing to do would be to accept that he's not going to be able to conquer Ukraine and subjugate Ukraine, because whatever happens now, that's not possible. I mean, the anger amongst the Ukrainian people and their willingness to resist is very high. So he'd be looking for a way out, but that's obviously a big blow to him, and he doesn't want to do it. So I think he's thrown everything at the war over the last month, everything available short of nuclear weapons. And I think, we have to realize what nuclear weapons allow Putin to do is gives him a sort of impunity to act below the nuclear threshold in the way that he's been acting. So there's a sort of logic in it, but it's based on a sort of bullying assumption that everybody can be coerced into giving up on things that matter to them if you hit them hard enough. And I think that's what he's still trying to do.
But do you think he will be able to push the nuclear button someday?
On the nuclear side, I think you have to realize that Putin uses nuclear weapons now. Putin uses nuclear weapons as a deterrent to NATO. So if we didn't have, if Russia wasn't a nuclear power, this could be like Iraq in 1991 when it invaded Kuwait, and the US and its allies immediately came in actively to defend for Saudi Arabia and then to liberate Kuwait. And this could have happened this time, but it didn't, because the Western countries don't want a nuclear war. So Putin is using nuclear weapons in that way. Now, he's done crazy things, so he may do crazy things in the future, which is why nobody quite goes to say there's no chance of nuclear weapons being used. But they don't really help him at the moment. I think what's important to realize is that as things stand, they give him a sort of cover while he follows the strategies that he's following. And we've had plenty of demonstrations. You don't need nuclear weapons to cause hurt. And they're actually quite difficult to use on the battlefield. And the risk is, of course, as with other Russian equipment, that it wouldn't turn out to be very good, that it would flop, that they wouldn't explode. Or Ukrainian forces would shoot them down, or they'd land in the wrong place. So I don't think it works for Putin particularly well to use nuclear weapons, but it's Putin, so nobody's going to say he definitely won't.
Well, I hope he will not push. We are hearing, Mr. Friedman, about Russian and Belarusian troops assembling in Belarus, not far from the Ukrainian border with Ukraine. Is attack from Belarus still possible at this point of time? What do you think?
It is, but I'd be very surprised. I think the advantage for Russia in what they're doing in Belarus is to tie up Ukrainian forces, so they have to be in a position just in case. I think that suits them fine. I think for Belarus, for Lukashenko, President Lukashenko of Belarus, there'd be a big risk. It'd be very unpopular amongst his people, actually probably amongst his army as well, and they could soon get bogged down, especially as the weather gets more wet. So I'd be surprised. I can see why, again, in this basic spirit of Putin throwing everything he can at the problem, at the moment he might be tempted to do so. But like so many of these moves, it could quite badly backfire. And I think Lukashenko knows he at the moment he's in a pretty vulnerable position, and if he attaches himself even more to Putin, that vulnerability could grow. But it does keep Ukrainian forces having to be in position just in case.
Can Putin change the current world order right now?
Well, I mean, I think if I understand your question correctly, I think the Russians, are very keen that everybody sees them as a great power, and that they act as a great power. But they're not a great power anymore. They've got nuclear weapons. They've got a veto on the Security Council. But the net result of what's happened so far is they've diminished themselves militarily, um, both in their army has been very badly mauled. They've lost a lot of their officer corps. They've lost a lot of reputation. They've lost a lot of kit. Um, so compared with China, which is very much a great power at the moment, and poses real challenges to the West, Putin has, I think, left Russia a pariah, isolated. It'll be economically weaker. So in that sense, the world order just does change because Russia slides down it.
Okay. So, has diplomacy any chance to work right now and to end this war?
So Erdogan again was talking about as being a would-be mediator and so on. I think it's difficult because Ukraine is clearly not going to concede any of its territory, and Putin is claiming for extra provinces that and doesn't even control all the territory on them. So he actually wants Ukraine to give Russia land which is already liberated. There are issues that can be discussed. My own view is that there will come a point, if in the land war, where the Russian military could well think its position is untenable. And so the approach I would take would be to encourage, not now, but at a later date, military to military talks to arrange a ceasefire, but not a ceasefire that leaves Russian troops on Ukrainian territory. It's a ceasefire where Ukraine says, we won't fire while you withdraw. And then later on, there's so many issues that will need to be addressed in a sort of proper peace conference where you're offering Russia easing economic sanctions, but in return you've got to address issues like reparations, war crimes. All those have been abducted. Um, uh, Neutrality and security guarantees, demarcating all the borders so that they're properly agreed in treaty language again. All of those things, I think, it's just very complicated. If you try to address all of those issues as a means to end the war will go on because they'll just take a long time to implement. So I think you need to get Russian troops out of Ukraine first, and you can make that easier by offering ceasefires. And say, I think more will have to happen on the ground before that happens. You're going to, at some point, the issue of Crimea will loom large. It's I know the Ukrainian position, and I fully sympathise with it. And I think if Russia isn't able to make a serious offer on the rest of the fight, then Ukraine will have every incentive just to keep on pushing to take Crimea as well. But I think as a matter of practice, the Americans and others will be very worried about pushing too hard there. And it's difficult. I mean, it's just militarily, it's much more difficult. So I think Crimea could come into play, but I can understand very well why he's not encouraging that thought at the moment.
Sir Freedman, Putin is trying to do different things in Ukraine, as you've already mentioned about this. But is this his strategy, or he does not have strategy at all?
I think he's throwing everything at the problem. That's his strategy. He's doing, you name it, he's done it in a way. He's now declared martial law. He's mobilized. He's made nuclear threats. He's attacking your infrastructure, attacking civilian populations. They're pushing men into the fight as much as they can to hold back Ukrainian advances. They're just trying to do everything at the moment, and there comes a point where that just hasn't worked. Um, I could, I'm worried, as I'm sure you all are, by the sort of things that could be done with the dam at Kherson and so on. But I don't see that any of this as a war-winning strategy. It's punitive. Um, it's it's retributive. But it doesn't actually uh, bring Ukraine to capitulate, which is what a good strategy for him would need. So I think that's what he's trying to do. I don't think it will succeed. Um, and the question is at what point he realizes that it's not likely to succeed, or people around him, or people in a position to push him aside. I think that's what we keep on waiting for.
Will there be Putin in Russia after Ukraine wins this war?
I don't know. I think Putin has gambled enormously. The damage he's done to Russia, leaving aside the damage he's done to Ukraine, is enormous. I mean, you haven't been. Russia hasn't had the same sort of attacks on its territory, but it's lost tens and tens of thousands of people. Its economy it will be in a bad way, and obviously Ukraine's is too. But Ukraine will have the chance to recover and reconstruct with external help. Nobody's going to particularly be helping Russia, and while Putin's there, he'll be a pariah. Very hard to repair relations with the rest of the world. So one would hope that he'll go. Uh, I know lots of Russian experts. None of them have got a clear scenario as to how this might happen and how it might be done. So, in our countries, if you make mistakes like this, you would expect to be pushed out. The UK can be pushed out for far less, but it's a dictatorship, and he's got control of the security forces. So we'll see. I think it could be very convulsive for Russia. I think lots of issues that have been suppressed over the past decade or so could rush to the fore if Putin isn't careful, which is another reason why I think there'll be quite a lot of pressure on him to try to find a way out if the current measures don't succeed.
Mr. Freedman, and my last question to you for today. Who is Putin?
Who? He's basically a spy. I think you have to. I mean, he's not a military man. Clearly, he's not a military man. He hasn't the things that he's done. People who follow military strategy wouldn't done. He's got, I think, a spy's view that you can manipulate people's perceptions and understanding of the world. That you can lie, and everybody knows you're lying. He knows people know that he's lying, but he feels he can get away with it. So I think it's somebody who's ideologically now quite driven. I don't think this makes sense unless you assume that what he says about Ukraine and its proper links with Russia and the history doesn't matter to him. It's a sort of ultra-nationalist agenda as well, reinforced by the FSB people around him, and it's very dangerous ideology, and it's bound up now with this conviction that he can always get his way, that his will always prevail, and I think he's shocked and finding a country that won't bend to his will. So I don't think and that's why I think he's struggling to find a way out. There are other people in his position that would be quite clever in declaring victory and walking away, but he doesn't even know how to do that. So I think it's somebody who's lived now for quite a long time in a world of his own construction, sort of almost a make-believe world, which doesn't accurately reflect reality, but leads him to act the way that he does.
And I hope he will not find the way out from the situation he is now and we are now. Thank you very much, Mr. Freedman, for conversation, for your honest answers. Thank you very much for your insights.
It's my pleasure, and obviously wish all the best to everybody in Ukraine.
Thank you. Ну а для наших глядачів я хочу нагадати про те, що сьогодні я розмовляв із дуже важливою людиною, почесний професор Королівського коледжу Лондона, сер Лоуренс Фрідман. Він є експертом із воєнних досліджень, тому цілком логічно, що ми з ним говорили про війну, яка зараз триває в Україні, про те, як ми цю війну виграємо, а Путін, звісно, переможе і піде в небуття. Ну що ж, на цьому в мене все. Мене звати Юрій Фізер. До зустрічі.